Somewhere in the mountains of old Japan, a woodcutter once made the mistake of traveling alone after dark. The path he knew by daylight had become something unrecognizable, swallowed by shadow and silence. Then he heard it. Not footsteps, not wind, but a sound that sat somewhere between a roar and a human scream. The trees ahead of him shook. The ground seemed to tremble beneath something vast and heavy. And when he finally looked up, what he saw standing at the bend in the road was not a bear, not a wolf, not any creature that belonged to the natural world. It was enormous. It had horns. Its skin was the color of bruised iron. And it was looking directly at him. That woodcutter, according to the tale, survived, but he never walked alone at night again, and he never spoke of what he saw without lowering his voice first. Welcome to one of the oldest, most layered, and most deeply human monsters in all of world mythology. I am so glad you are here, because today we are going inside the legend of the Oni, the horned demon of Japanese folklore. A creature that has haunted the islands of Japan for over 1,000 years, that has been painted on temple walls, carved into festival masks, hurled out of doorways in ancient ritual, and whispered about in every region of the country. If you enjoy stories like this, stories that pull you into the dark corners of history and mythology, and leave you thinking for days afterward, please take a moment to like this video and subscribe. There is so much more where this is coming from, and every single story we tell is one worth staying for. Now, let us talk about the Oni. Most people outside of Japan encounter the Oni as a Halloween costume or a character in a video game. Colorful, cartoonish, vaguely threatening. But that image is a shadow of a shadow. The real Oni, the one that lived in the imagination of ancient Japan, was something far more complicated, far more terrifying, and far more meaningful than any costume could capture. To understand it properly, you need to understand the world that created it. For centuries, Japanese society was built on strict hierarchies, spiritual obligations, and a deep awareness of the boundary between the living and the dead. The natural world was not just scenery. It was alive with forces, spirits, and presences that demanded respect. Buddhism had arrived from the continent and blended with older Shinto traditions, creating a spiritual landscape where the afterlife was not a distant abstraction, but a very present reality. The dead could return, spirits could wander. And the places where the human world grew thin, mountain passes, river crossings, the hours just before dawn, were places where something else might step through. Into this world came the Oni, not as a single creature with a fixed description, but as a category of being, a type of supernatural force that could take many forms. The one constant was that they were not human and they were not safe. But here is the first thing that makes the Oni so fascinating. Unlike many monsters from world mythology, the Oni was not simply evil. It occupied a far stranger and more uncomfortable space. It was a punisher, a guardian, a force of divine justice. And sometimes, in the darkest versions of the tales, it was a human being who had become something monstrous through suffering, rage, or grief. So where did the Oni come from? There is not one answer. There are several, and each one reveals something different about the creature and about the people who feared it. The oldest and most scholarly explanation connects the Oni to the Chinese concept of demonic spirits that were imported into Japan along with Buddhism and Chinese court culture, beginning around the 6th and 7th centuries of the Common Era. In Chinese cosmology, there were beings called gui, spirits of the dead, that could become malevolent if not properly honored. Japanese religious thinkers absorbed these ideas and began to develop their own version of supernatural punishment. The Oni became the enforcers of the Buddhist underworld, the demons who escorted sinful souls to judgment and carried out the torments of hell. In this reading, the Oni is not random. It is institutional. It is the face of divine consequence. The second origin story is older and stranger. Some scholars of Japanese folklore argue that the Oni descends from much more ancient native beliefs, from the idea of spirits that lived in the wilderness beyond the boundaries of civilization. In ancient Japanese thought, the world was divided between the cultivated, safe human space and the wild, unpredictable, dangerous space beyond it. Mountains, deep forests, and the open sea were not just physically dangerous, they were spiritually dangerous. The things that lived there were not bound by human rules. The Oni in this reading is the wilderness itself given a face. It is what happens when nature looks back at you. The third explanation is deeply human and deeply troubling. Some researchers believe that the Oni legend was shaped, at least in part, by real encounters with people who existed outside of society. Outcasts, exiles, those suffering from certain illnesses that caused physical deformity, travelers who arrived from distant lands and looked unfamiliar. In a world where difference was frightening and the margins of society were places of genuine danger, the figure of the Oni may have absorbed the fear of the other, the unknown person, the one who did not belong. This is not a comfortable idea, but it is an honest one, and it tells us something important about how monsters are made. The fourth origin is perhaps the most poetic. In some traditions, the Oni was once human, a person consumed by jealousy, hatred, or grief, so overwhelming that it transformed them. The most famous version of this idea involves women who were betrayed, abandoned, or driven mad by sorrow, and who became Oni through the sheer force of their emotion. The transformation was not a punishment from outside, it was something that grew from within. And that version of the Oni is the one that has haunted Japanese literature and theater for centuries. Now let us move into the legends themselves, because this is where the Oni truly comes alive. One of the most celebrated figures in all of Japanese folklore is the hero Minamoto no Yorimitsu, known more commonly as Raiko, who lived during the 10th and 11th centuries of the Common Era. According to the legends that grew around him, Raiko was not just a warrior. He was a slayer of supernatural evil, and his most famous enemy was an Oni lord named Shuten-doji, which translates roughly as the drunken child. Shuten-doji was said to live on Mount Oe, west of the old capital, and he and his band of Oni had been abducting young men and women from the city, dragging them back to their mountain fortress, and consuming them. The terror in the capital was real and widespread. Finally, Raiko and his 4 most trusted retainers disguised themselves as traveling priests and made their way up the mountain. They were welcomed into the fortress, because Shuten-doji, for all his savagery, had a code of hospitality. He feasted with them, drank with them, and eventually fell into a heavy sleep. Then Raiko and his men removed their disguises, put on armor they had hidden beneath their robes, and struck. The decapitated head of Shuten-doji, according to the tale, continued to speak even after it had been separated from the body. It raged and cursed and snapped at Raiko until the warriors pinned it down with their combined strength. Even in death, the Oni was not easily silenced. This story is remarkable for several reasons. Shuten-doji is terrifying, yes, but he is also given complexity. He drinks sake, he speaks, he has a sense of honor. He is not a mindless beast. He is something closer to a fallen king, a lord of chaos who exists in opposition to the ordered human world. And Raiko's victory over him is not just a physical triumph. It is the reassertion of civilization over the wild, of the capital over the mountain, of human order over supernatural disorder. But not all Oni stories end with the monster's defeat. Some of the most haunting tales are the ones where the Oni wins, or where the line between Oni and human dissolves entirely. There is a story from the No theater tradition about a woman named Aoi no Ue, a noblewoman who falls terribly ill. When a shaman is called to investigate, she discovers that a living spirit, the spirit of a woman consumed by jealousy, has attached itself to the sick woman and is slowly killing her. The jealous woman has not died. She has not been cursed by a god. She has simply felt so much, so intensely, that her spirit has begun to leave her body and do damage in the world. By the end of the story, that living spirit has taken on the qualities of an oni. The mask worn in the traditional performance shifts from a woman's face to a horned, wild-eyed demon. The transformation is gradual, and that gradual quality is what makes it unbearable to watch. This is the oni as psychological truth. The idea that certain emotions, left unaddressed, left festering in the dark, can change you into something you no longer recognize. There is also the famous Setsubun ritual, which is still practiced in Japan every year at the turning of the seasons. In this ritual, roasted soybeans are thrown out of doorways or at a person wearing an oni mask, while the participants shout a phrase that translates roughly as "demons out, good fortune in." It is a purification ceremony, a way of driving the oni from the household and welcoming in the New Year's blessings. But here is the detail that most people overlook. The person wearing the oni mask in many households is the father, the head of the family. The children throw beans at their own parent. The demon is not a stranger from outside. The demon is someone you know. And you drive it out, and then it comes back inside, and life continues. There is something very wise and very unsettling in that arrangement. Now I want to pause here and ask you something directly. When you think about the oni, does it feel more like a monster to you, or more like a mirror? Because I think that question is at the heart of everything we have been discussing, and I would genuinely love to know your answer. Leave your thoughts in the comments below. Tell me which version of the oni resonates with you most: the demon enforcer, the wilderness spirit, the transformed human, or something else entirely. Your interpretation matters, and this community is built on exactly these kinds of conversations. Let us talk now about what the oni symbolized, because the symbolism is where the creature becomes truly profound. On the surface, the oni is a symbol of evil, chaos, and punishment. It is the thing that comes for you when you have done wrong. In Buddhist cosmology, the oni of the underworld serve the king of the dead, and they are instruments of justice. They drag souls to judgment. They carry out sentences. They are terrifying, but they are not arbitrary. They represent the idea that actions have consequences, that the universe keeps accounts, and that no one escapes the final reckoning. But underneath that surface, the oni also symbolizes everything that human society tries to exclude and suppress: the wild, the emotional, the excessive, the outcast. In a culture that placed enormous value on restraint, on knowing your place, on maintaining the correct face in every situation, the oni was the embodiment of everything that restraint was designed to hold back. It was too loud, too large, too hungry, too honest in its appetites. It did not bow. It did not apologize. It simply was. And in that sense, the oni was also a kind of freedom, a dangerous, destructive, ultimately unsustainable freedom, but freedom nonetheless. Some of the most interesting oni in Japanese literature are not the villains. They are the ones who have simply refused to be contained. Now we arrive at the part of the story that I find most disturbing and most fascinating: the mysteries and contradictions that surround the oni. Here is one that few people consider. In certain regional traditions in Japan, particularly in the Tohoku region in the northeast, the oni is not a demon at all. It is a protective spirit. There are shrines dedicated to oni, There are festivals where the Oni is welcomed, not driven away. In these traditions, the Oni is a guardian of the community, a fierce and terrible protector that keeps worse things at bay. The very qualities that make it frightening, its size, its strength, its disregard for human convention, are what make it effective as a guardian. So which is it? Demon or protector? Punisher or guardian? The answer, as with so many things in mythology, is that it depends on who you are asking and what you need it to be. There is also the deeply strange tradition of the Oni being connected to the direction of the northeast. In traditional Japanese geomancy, the northeast was called the Kimon, the demon gate, the direction from which evil and misfortune entered. Buildings were designed to protect against this direction. Certain rituals were performed facing away from it. But here is the contradiction. The city of Kyoto, the ancient capital, was built with the famous temples of Mount Hiei to its northeast, specifically to guard against the Oni that might approach from that direction. The Oni was both the threat and the reason for the protection. Demon defined the architecture of civilization itself. And then there is the question of the Oni's appearance. The classic image is well known. Enormous body, wild hair, a club made of iron, skin that is red or blue or occasionally green, and most distinctively, 2 horns growing from the head. But why horns? In Buddhist iconography, imported from India and China, horns were associated with demonic beings, with the untamed and the dangerous. But in older Japanese traditions, horns could also mark a being as sacred, as set apart from the ordinary, as possessing a kind of terrible power that demanded respect rather than simple fear. The horns are not just decoration, they are a statement about the nature of the creature that wears them. There is also the iron club, the kanabo, which deserves its own moment of attention. The kanabo is not just a weapon, it is a symbol of overwhelming, unstoppable force. There is actually a Japanese proverb that translates as giving a kanabo to an Oni, meaning to give an already powerful thing even more power. The Oni does not need the club to be dangerous. The club is an excess, a redundancy, a way of saying that this creature operates beyond the normal rules of proportion and restraint. And yet, in some of the oldest depictions, the Oni carries no weapon at all. It simply reaches out with its hands. And somehow, that is more frightening. The legacy of the Oni in the modern world is extraordinary, and it is worth tracing carefully because it tells us something about the durability of certain kinds of fear. The Oni has survived, not because Japanese culture has remained static, but because the Oni keeps finding new containers. In traditional theater, it was the mask that transformed the actor, the moment when the human face disappeared and something older and stranger looked out from behind it. In woodblock prints from the 17th and 18th centuries, the Oni appeared in vivid, almost joyful color, its ferocity made beautiful by the artist's hand. In the great ghost stories and supernatural tales that circulated in the same era, the Oni appeared as the consequence of human cruelty and neglect, the thing that came back when people failed to honor their obligations to the dead. In the centuries since, the Oni has traveled. It has appeared in martial arts traditions as a symbol of indomitable strength. It has appeared in tattoo culture as an image of protection and power. It has appeared in countless works of literature, theater, film, and visual art, each time wearing a slightly different face, but always recognizable by those horns, that club, that wild and searching gaze. What is remarkable is how the Oni has managed to hold on to its complexity even as it spread. It did not become simply a villain. It did not become simply a mascot. It remained something genuinely ambiguous, something that could be feared and respected, and even, in certain moments, pitied. That is a rare quality in a mythological creature, and it speaks to the depth of the tradition that created it. The Oni also survives in the living practice of setsubun, which continues to this day. Every year, in homes and temples and schools across Japan, the beans are thrown, the mask is worn, the ancient words are spoken. Children who have never read a single word of Buddhist scripture or studied a line of classical Japanese literature still know what an Oni looks like and what it means to drive one away. That is the power of a myth that has been properly tended. And so we come to the end of our journey through the world of the Oni. But I want to leave you with one final thought, because I think it is the most important one. Every culture in human history has created its version of the Oni, the overwhelming force that punishes wrongdoing, the wild thing that waits beyond the edge of the known world. The transformed human, the person consumed by their own darkness until they became something unrecognizable. These are not Japanese ideas. They are human ideas. They are the shapes that our deepest fears and our deepest guilts take when we give them form. The Oni endures because it tells the truth. Not a comfortable truth, not a reassuring one, but a true one, that the boundary between human and monster is thinner than we like to believe, that what we refuse to acknowledge in ourselves does not disappear, it waits, it grows, and eventually, it comes to the door. The woodcutter who met something on that mountain road survived, but he never forgot what looked back at him from the darkness, and neither, I suspect, will you. Thank you so much for spending this time with me, inside one of the most extraordinary legends in all of world mythology. If this story moved you, challenged you, or simply kept you up a little later than you planned, please give this video a like and subscribe to the channel. It genuinely makes a difference and allows us to keep going deeper into the stories that deserve to be told. And now, I want to hear from you. Which creature, myth, or legend should we explore next? Leave your suggestion in the comments below. Every great story begins with someone asking the right question, and your suggestions are how we find the next one. The shadows are full of stories. Let us find them together.